Welcome to Spears Podcast, a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore. Every week, we pour a drink and learn about a new story from around the world. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Julia.
And we are two weird sisters hand in hand. So I am so excited, Julia. Perhaps top 10 episodes I'm excited to record because we are talking today about Macbeth.
Macbeth. Yes. So this is another one of our Supernatural Shakespeare episodes. I think that's what I'm deciding to call these.
Very nice.
3 episodes in, I finally come up with the title. Very, very classic.
You got to make sure it fits. We got to make sure it settles.
Of course. But this one is, I think, near and dear to both of our hearts. And that is, of course, Macbeth. Now, Amanda, we could talk about our experience with the production of Macbeth, but do you want to talk about your experience and thoughts on the play?
Gosh, I just love this play so much. We talk often about the fact that we were in a very intense high school theater program, and this is the show that was like my senior thesis, and yours too, because you, in my recollection, were fully in charge of the props for the first time, including a prodigious amount of fake blood.
So much fake blood.
Yeah, it was a lot. And I stage managed it. It felt like my project, and it was so exciting. It was really my first experience of engaging deeply with a text and watching it go from, to the extent that a bunch of teenagers can, reading these words, figuring out what they meant, seeing performances that even looking back, I think were genuinely very good, and a set and a show that I was really proud of. And so to this day, just being around it, reading essentially the entire play every day for 2.5 months, I can quote pretty much the entirety of the play. I wrote about it.
That's impressive.
Yeah, for a lot of my high school standardized testing exams, to the extent that once someone was like, did she have a copy of this with her? And they're like, no, she's just weird. And
that's true.
Yeah, that happened. And I love it, and I love reading it, and it's beautiful. And I will say I have never once thought about the mythology or folklore of this play. So I am really excited to approach it from a new angle.
Oh, Amanda, I'm excited too. But of course, I think to get us started, we do need to go through the plot of Macbeth, which obviously is something that you and I are very familiar with. I feel like a lot of people are as well. But this one I feel like might not be taught in schools as much as we were forced to read Romeo and Juliet in 9th grade. And that is all I know about Shakespeare,
Yeah, or even Hamlet, which, is fine.
It's fine.
Hamlet's a whiny little baby, but it's okay.
We might do Hamlet eventually. There's ghosts.
It's okay.
Yeah.
But Macbeth, better. Macbeth has insane marriage and 3 witches and a lot of very dramatic monologues about blood. And it's everything I wanted as a teen and everything I like as an adult.
Yes, that's true. It's still one of my favorites, easily my favorite tragedy/history. I forget which one it kind of falls under, but I like it both.
Let's do it.
So our play begins with pretty much the reason why we're doing this episode in the first place, which is a trio of witches, the Weird Sisters, who appear in the middle of a storm on the Scottish moor and agree that they are going to meet so that they confront our quote-unquote hero, I guess, Macbeth, before disappearing again. It's a very short scene.
He's kind of like our heroic object. A lot of heroism is placed on and around him by women, but he's just kind of there. He's just Ken, I think, is my thesis statement for this.
But he's Knuff, so.
He's Knuff.
So we then cut to the Scottish king, Duncan, who receives news that his 2 generals, Macbeth and his buddy Banquo, have managed to defeat 2 separate invading armies, and he is stoked about that and is planning to reward them for their service. Very quick scene again. This one I feel like has a bunch of the shortest scenes I've ever read in Shakespeare because the plot keeps moving. There's a lot of long monologues, but other than that, those scenes go by fast.
Yeah, it's really a play where a lot happens until we slow down and watch 2 people make a decision together or watch one person sort of amble around lost in their own thoughts, which is something I like. I love a play where it's a fixed set and people are just in it for 2.5 hours fighting.
Yes.
I'm Irish. I love it. I love that kind of drama. All the Conor McPherson plays, I love them. And so Macbeth has a lot of these moments, but you're totally right. There's a lot of just shit happening and you're what's happening? And then it doesn't matter really because you get 2 people discussing ambition.
Yes. So we then, speaking of people discussing ambition, we then actually come across Macbeth and Banquo heading towards Duncan's camp. And this is when they encounter the witches as they are crossing the moor. Now, the witches immediately hit Macbeth with a prophecy that he is going to be made Thane, which is like Scottish nobility, and eventually would become King of Scotland. They then turn to Banquo and they're like, nah, you're not going to be king, but your children will be king. So that's cool, I guess.
But also, what the hell?
You're like, excuse me.
How's that supposed to happen?
Yeah. So these witches end up disappearing pretty much as quickly as they appeared. And then Macbeth and Banquo are both like, what the fuck was that? What was that? What was with those ladies and those moors and whatnot?
Very weird. Also, I love that they just like they amble on and just like ask each other questions. They're just like chatting.
Yeah.
And so they walk on in this first scene, and the first witch is like, "Where has thou been, sister?" And the second one goes, "Killing swine."
Swine.
Okay. And obviously, teens and adults all over the world have eaten up these roles. Very good.
There's nothing like watching 3 teenage girls play this in particular because you're like, ooh, I'm a little spooky. And then a lot of times, like, sometimes people will do them up so they're very, like, crone-like, and then other times they're just like, these are hot ladies that are dressed like they've been in the woods for a while. Get used to it.
Yeah, and I think 2 of our 3 witches were named Amanda, none of which was me. There were 5 Amandas in our high school theater program of 120 people. It's a high proportion.
That's true. That's true. So these witches disappear. Banquo and Macbeth are like, what the fuck? That was a weird experience. It's probably all bullshit, though. Anyway, let's get back to camp.
Bye.
But before they can leave, 2 of Duncan's men appear and they're like, hey, Macbeth, congrats on that battle. You're Thane of Cawdor now.
Damn.
Yes.
Thanks. A lot's happening just to me here.
And at this, Macbeth goes, now hold up a minute. Because those witches said that this would happen. Now, does that mean I'm actually going to become king? Interesting.
One part of this happened, so perhaps the second will.
At this point, he is like, okay, well, let's wait and see, I guess. Better write to my wife, let her know what's going on with all this prophecy and the fact that I am now the Thane and also that the king is going to come stay at our castle.
Big deal. Get it ready. Thank you.
Now, speaking of Macbeth's wife, Lady Macbeth, she is way more decisive about this witch's prophecies than her husband is.
Yeah, she's giving real, like, can't have a job as a woman in the 1950s. So she, like, creates, like, a neighborhood association that sort of rivals the city government in, like, the scale and scope of its power.
I put in my notes, I said, she was girl bossing before anyone dreamed of girl bossing.
It's very true. And in all senses of the word, in the toxicity and in the self-congratulation.
Yes, and goddamn it, Amanda, she wants to be queen, which means her husband needs to be the king, and she straight up tells him once he gets home that he has got to murder Duncan in order to make that happen, even if it's in their very household, and they're going to break all the rules of, like, the guest-host relationship.
Yeah, Macbeth's like, but hospitality. And she's like, fuck that.
Fuck that. You can be king.
Yeah.
Yeah. Macbeth is, as you mentioned, pretty reluctant about all of this at first. But because Lady Macbeth is a stone cold bitch, she manages to persuade him to do the murder. He really does.
Yeah.
So they decide that they're going to get Duncan's 2 guards just blackout drunk, and then they can blame them for the murder in the morning since they won't be able to remember what happened, and they'll be pretty much defenseless, right?
Not the worst idea in the world.
Not the worst idea. I mean, you also have to figure out how someone holds their liquor because not everyone, when they drink a lot, blacks out. So it's really an interesting dilemma, but they seem to think it's going to work. Lady Macbeth is very self-congratulatory about this whole plan that she has come up with.
Yeah.
So Macbeth goes through with the stabbing of Duncan while he's sleeping, even though he is plagued by these visions of bloody floating daggers, and there's some weird, like, heavy potential witchcraft in the air that's happening that Macbeth, like, can sense, and he's like, oh, is this just dreams and illusions, or is this real magic that is doing this? Who can say, really? But it seems like I gotta do a murder. That's the classic, is this a dagger I see before me line for people who are familiar with Macbeth.
Yeah. And if you're into, like, psychological horror of any kind. I think having that like genre and trope in your mind as you watch or read or see Macbeth is really rewarding because there is a lot of like, can I trust my own mind here, which is incredibly potent as a genre of like thriller or horror.
That is my favorite slash scariest type of horror to me. The idea of like, I'm seeing these things and no one else is seeing them. Am I the one that is wrong, or are these people just not aware?
Yeah, same.
Oof, it's rough. So Macbeth does the murder. When he finishes doing the murder, Lady Macbeth realizes that he forgot to leave the daggers in the room so that they can frame those guards for Duncan's murder. So she goes and puts them back herself, while Macbeth kind of is like very nervous about everything that's going on now that the murder has been done. He hears this mysterious knocking that he can't explain, which actually turns out to be the arrival of another Thane named Macduff, who will be important later. Wink. Wink. So Macduff arrives and has a scene with a porter who is super drunk, typically performed that way at least, and he compares himself to being a porter at the gates of hell, which is a great monologue. If you're doing this in a high school production, pick just the broiest dude possible to play the porter and just make sure he memorizes all his lines, because that's all he really does for the play.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible and really provides some comic relief in the like truest sense of the word because we've just seen like 25 very tense minutes of like plotting, engaging in, and then cleaning up a murder. And then the porter is like, oh, wow, big door. It's great.
Big door. I had to piss because I drank too much.
Yep.
Drinking makes you have to piss. And you're like, cool, guy, thank you.
It sure does. That's so relatable.
So relatable. So Macbeth, after the porter does his whole scene, enters and is like, what are you doing here, Macduff? And Macduff is like, well, the king asked to see me. Is he awake yet? Like, it's early morning at this point, which I like that the assumption is like, yeah, the king rises with the dawn typically. So here I am, Macduff, ready to meet with the king.
Mm-hmm.
Macbeth, in like a really kind of like monosyllabic or really short for Shakespeare, at least, is like, no, he's not up. Do you want to go see him though? Knowing that the king is dead at this point, but is basically like, all right, Macduff is going to be my witness to the quote unquote crime that happened where the guards killed the king.
Yeah, and as Macduff is in there, like discovering the body, his, little manservant is chatting with Macbeth, and Macbeth just says, "'Twas a rough night." That line always gets laughs.
Oh, yeah, it was a rough night, huh, buddy? Yeah, yeah. So Macduff now is acting witness to this murder, and Macbeth offstage, quote, in a rage, kills the two guards that he is now implicated.
Convenient.
Super convenient. That was all part of the plan. Lady Macbeth laid it all out. He's good to go, right? So while all this is happening, Duncan's two sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, which is one of my favorite names. Donalbain is so good.
Yeah, I really like Fleance, who comes up later too. Very good.
So they arrive at the castle, and upon hearing the news of their father's death, they both flee the country, concerned that whoever killed their father will probably want to kill them as well, which basically leaves Macbeth a clear path to become king. Now, I don't know how the lineages here in the Scottish time period that we're in, I'm not exactly sure, worked.
Yeah, who knows?
But yeah, it's just like, oh, well, Macbeth, the newest Thane, he gets to be king now.
I mean, I get it in that he's like a recent war hero,
Sure.
as in like several days ago. And the king's last act before he was murdered was elevating him in that sense. And like, oh, okay, I do see how he's kind of identified as a successor. But I think part of the reason why, I know we talked about this in our episode on The Tempest, they're like, Scotland up there, who knows what they do? Always murdering. I think that's kind of the like English view on the Scots at this moment.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So Macbeth now gonna become king. Macduff is rightfully pretty suspicious about all these deaths that keep happening, but does not voice his suspicions while Macbeth is able to basically take over. However, Macbeth being king does not solve all of his problems. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I think it just kind of exacerbates all the stuff that was there before. But let me tell you, Lady Macbeth loving it. She has like crown. She's got nice garments. She's in here like holding a banquet. She is so excited to be queen.
Oh, yes, she is extremely excited to be queen. But Macbeth gets to thinking, Amanda, and he goes, well, if the two first prophecies from the Weird Sisters came true, what about Banquo?
weird. If I'm king, and that did happen, and me and Lady Macbeth are ruling, how is it that some other men's kids are going to become king?
Yeah. So the witches told Banquo, you're not going to become king, but your heirs will be able to eventually seize the throne. So Macbeth, he does what I guess any power hungry person would do. He turns on his friend. He hires a bunch of murderers to kill Banquo and his heir, as you mentioned before, Fleance.
Fleance.
Fly, Fleance, fly.
I know. Oh my God.
So they end up ambushing Banquo on his way to this royal feast that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are throwing. But Fleance manages to escape, even though Banquo is killed. This pisses Macbeth off even more because Banquo wasn't even the real threat. It was as long as his son was alive, Fleance could overthrow him at any moment.
It was baby Fleance.
Baby Fleance could do anything at any time, and Macbeth is not satisfied with that ending.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Banquo could sire more kids, but it gives you a good 15, 20 years to, enjoy being a king, which, honestly, I think more than that's asking for too much.
It's also super easy to kill a baby.
you know, that's true.
I'm not wrong. So Macbeth tries to basically keep up appearances after this kind of both works and doesn't work his plan. So he is throwing this royal feast, but absolutely fails to, again, keep up appearances because at this royal feast, the ghost of Banquo appears before Macbeth, even though no one else can see it.
Yep, which, Julia, you expertly attended in our production with a lot of talcum powder.
A lot of talcum powder, and also I put a blood packet in the actor who was playing Banquo's mouth, so when he bit down, it would drip out of his mouth.
It looked very good. Very good.
It was one of my favorites. So it seems to most of the Scottish nobility in attendance at this royal banquet, watching Macbeth basically have a mental breakdown, that's not the most reassuring thing that your new king could be doing, right?
No, you show up at their house, you expect them to be like, hey, this is me, this is us, this is the plan, welcome, this is your onboarding meeting, got to fill out your W-2. No. We have lots of increasingly frantic falling apart of the mood as Lady Macbeth is like, what the actual fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, she is trying so hard to take the reins and regain control of the situation, but it becomes very clear that the rest of the nobility and even Macbeth's subjects are not super pleased with the new management.
Mm-hmm.
They are not having a good time under Macbeth's rule, which is fair. He is out there fully murdering people or sending people to murder his friends and the other nobility.
Yeah, and he's engaging with a ghost that nobody else can see and saying ridiculous things that Lady Macbeth is really trying to be like, oh, yes, he's always like this. God, he won't be. Oh, God, it's classic. So funny.
It's probably not good that he's always like this, Lady Macbeth.
Yeah, no.
So Macbeth, frightened by all of these ghosts and magic and prophecies that have been happening to him, chooses to seek out the witches. Now, in their cavern, we finally see the witches again. It's been a minute. A lot has happened in between the last time we saw them. They are circling a cauldron, chanting a spell with one of their most classic lines, the double, double, toil and trouble.
Fire burn and cauldron bubble, baby.
Mm-hmm. So depending on which version you're reading or the production that you're seeing, Hecate actually appears as the goddess of these witches and compliments them on their work thus far. A lot of productions end up cutting this because it's just a lot of extra fluff, and Hecate doesn't really have a big influence on the plot the way that the regular witches do. So if you see that, shout out, because normally she gets cut.
Yeah, I haven't seen her depicted on stage yet, but I would be really curious to. So hopefully I get to see that in the future.
Yes. Well, she disappears pretty quickly when one of the witches announces, by the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes. Another classic witch line.
Chills every time.
And that signals the arrival of Macbeth. And Macbeth asks the witches, demands really, not super asks, but demands, to reveal how true their prophecies about him were. And the witches being, witches, they summon these horrible apparitions for him, each which addresses his biggest fears about his rule. So the first is a floating head that warns him to beware Macduff, which he's like, well, yeah, dude, obviously I've always suspected Macduff. He's always suspected me. I know to take heed of him. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a bloody child that tells him none of woman born shall harm Macbeth.
And this is something that folks may know because it is a joke kind of referenced in pop culture, or not really a joke, but just like a reference that people make. But continue.
So he takes that as a pretty good deal because he's like, well, everyone is born of a woman. You
Duh.
assume, Macbeth.
Yeah.
You assume. And then another child appears to him, this time crowned and holding a tree, and tells Macbeth that he will be safe until Burnham Woods moves to Dunsinane Hill. Which, again, Macbeth is like, sick. That'll never happen. Forests don't move.
And this actually sort of calls back to a line from a couple scenes before when Lady Macbeth sort of dismisses the entire banquet after this has gone completely awry. And she's like left alone with Macbeth for a moment on the stage. And he says, "It will have blood, they say. Blood will have blood. Stones have been known to move and trees to speak." And so I always thought it was a really interesting crossing of like later he's like, okay, well, like the entire forest can't like pick itself up and move to a new location. So I'm good. No, you're not.
No, you aren't. And you said that yourself. You foreshadowed. This whole thing is foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, the last apparition that appears to him is 8 crowned kings that parade past him, the last carrying a mirror, and Banquo's ghost appearing at the end of that line. Now, Amanda, do you know why the ghost is holding a mirror at the end?
Because Macbeth is going to be a dead king soon enough.
So it's actually not for Macbeth. This is a metatextual thing.
Oh, really?
Because Shakespeare wrote this play basically for King James at the time. And King James claimed to have his line descended from the line of Banquo.
Oh.
And so holding the mirror up was supposed to reflect the image of the king so that he could see himself there in the play.
Fascinating. Also kind of sinister. I love it.
I know. And we'll talk a little bit about King James because he does have a lot of influence on how this play was written and why this play was written.
Oh, hell yeah, dude.
But we'll get to that later. So Macbeth, seeing all of these visions, demands answers, but the witches just kind of disappear again as one of the Scottish nobility arrives to tell Macbeth that Macduff has fled to England to join Duncan's oldest son, Malcolm.
Which, we've all seen Game of Thrones at this point. It's really bad when the legitimate issue of the previous king kind of meets up with a well-placed challenger to the current holder of the throne.
For sure. Now, Macbeth, taking the warning of the first vision, decides that he is going to do something about Macduff. And so he's like, all right, I'm going to send some men, seize Macduff's castle. And you know what? While we're at it, why don't we kill his wife and children?
Yep. Dark, bad, not good.
No, and we're not supposed to like the decisions that Macbeth is making here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're getting close to the reveal of Macbeth's fate, but before we reveal it like the witches in their cavern, let's grab a refill on our brew.
Let's do it.
Hey, it's Julia, and welcome to The Refill. I have some exciting stuff to tell you, and I will get to our usual thanking our patrons and my recommendations and our ads in just a bit, but we are so excited to tell you all about the MultiCrew Drive. Now, Multitude exists because of support from listeners like you, and the best way that you can support Multitude is by joining the MultiCrew, which is our membership program that lets you, our listeners, help to fund new work from Multitude and get exclusive perks. That's why from now until October 1st, we are running the MultiCrew Drive. We are putting 2 weeks aside to highlight the ways that your support makes a difference to us at Multitude and how that support gets paid back to you, our community. So our goal is to add 100 new and upgrading members to the MultiCrew by October 1st. By joining the MultiCrew for as little as $5 a month, you can get some amazing perks like exclusive audio content, access to our MultiCrew only channels on Discord, and so much more. So here's how it works. Anyone who joins or upgrades by October 1st will get our brand new This Mug Supports Conversational Podcast That Bring People Together mug. And anyone on an annual plan by October 1st will be immortalized on our We Put 2023 on Our Back plaque. Annual plans are particularly helpful to us since we can count on a whole year of support instead of just varying month to month. So, we want to thank our annual members in particular at every tier with these new perks. Plus, our annual plans have a special discount. You can get 2 months for free when you sign up for the year. To join the MultiCrew, head to multicrew.club to sign up for your annual membership before October 1st, 2023, and receive amazing perks plus our exclusive mug and be immortalized on our plaque. Remember, sign up for an annual membership at multicrew.club and join the MultiCrew. Now, of course, we are appreciative of everyone that supports us, and that includes our patrons, like supporting producer level patrons Alicia Ann, Ginger Spursboy, Hannah Jack Marie, Jane, Neaselkins, Lily, Matthew, Nathan, Phil Fresh, Rico Like, Captain Jonathan Malachi Cosmos, Sarah and Scott, and of course, our legend level patrons Ariana, Audra, Bex, Chibi Yokai, Morgan H, Sarah, and Bia Me Up Scotty. And you too can help support us at Patreon by going to patreon.com/spiritspodcast today. I also have a quick recommendation for you. It's not really a spooky season recommendation, but it is something that got me back into my reading after a little bit of a slump, and that is In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. It's got a little bit of sci-fi, it's got found family, it's got a little bit of like romance to it. I think you'd like it. That is In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. And hey, if you have a second, email us your hometown urban legends. You can either send them to spiritspodcast@gmail.com or go to spiritspodcast.com/contact to send those in. We love reading all of your stories, and we have some exciting stuff going on here in terms of our hometown urban legends. So the more emails we get, the better those episodes are. Send them in now. Again, that's spiritspodcast@gmail.com or spiritspodcast.com/contact. And now this episode is sponsored by HeroForge. And listen, I know we're all a bunch of nerds here, right? And you might really enjoy having minis for your D&D or tabletop RPG game. Now, I love minis, but I am terrible at painting them. I am terrible at a lot of different things when it comes to the small, fine motor skills. But HeroForge makes it so easy to make cool custom minis for you and your games. HeroForge offers fully customizable tabletop miniatures with dozens of fantasy species and thousands of parts to choose from. Their easy-to-use design tools lets you build your perfect mini online using a fully 3D in-depth character creator right in your web browser. They offer custom minis in a variety of materials, including color-printed options, which I am in love with because, again, I can't paint those little itty bitty pieces. They also offer downloadable model files that you can use to 3D print your own unique designs at home. And they are constantly expanding their collection with customizable options. They add new parts every week and major features like new species and custom posing on a regular basis. They also allow you to create your perfect mini in color with advanced features like decals, makeup, war paint, and so much more. You can design your unique miniature and get it printed in full color with no painting needed. Your role-playing world is colorful, and now your miniatures can be too with HeroForge custom color minis. Visit HeroForge.com to start designing your custom miniature today, and check back often because new content is added every week. Now, you've probably heard Amanda talk on the podcast about how much she loves puzzles, and that's why we are working with Ravensburger. You can indulge in the timeless pleasure of assembling Ravensburger's extraordinary jigsaw puzzles. They have premium quality puzzles that are crafted with meticulous attention to detail, bringing you an unparalleled puzzle-solving adventure. With a rich heritage dating back to 1883, Ravensburger puzzles have become an integral part of families' lives across generations. So you can share the joy of puzzling with friends and family, knowing that your cherished puzzles will stand the test of time. So enjoy a mindful moment and immerse yourself in a world of captivating colors, stunning imagery, and intricate designs that will delight people of all ages. Regardless of your preferences or skill level, you will find a jigsaw puzzle that perfectly suits you thanks to a wide range of imagery, themes, and piece counts available. So start small and work your way up to over 40,000 pieces? That's so many pieces. Are you up for the challenge? So you can shop Ravensburger on Amazon today or go to their website, ravensburger.us. And finally, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of times I lay in bed and my mind is just racing. Sometimes it keeps me up at night. Sometimes it wakes me up too early and I can't fall back asleep. But sometimes it just prevents me from really enjoying my life because my brain is just going a mile a minute. And it feels like sometimes there's just no way to slow it down. And if you ever find that it's just as you're trying to fall asleep, your brain suddenly won't stop talking and your thoughts start racing before bed or in other inopportune times, there is a great way to help make those racing thoughts go away, and that's talking through them. And therapy gives you a place to do that so that you can get out of your negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional peace. And I have had the delight of having a very good therapist who is very good at telling me, hey, sometimes the best way to break the cycle is imagining that your thoughts are a leaf going down a stream and you just let that leaf flow away. And hopefully those thoughts flow away as well. But sometimes they don't flow away and they're just going down the drain and you need someone to talk to about that. And that's why I think therapy is important. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/spirits today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/spirits. And now let's get back to the show. So we're back, and for this one, I originally wanted to do something inspired by the witches, but there are a lot of just weird cocktails out there that kind of riff on the double double toil and trouble. So instead, I'm going to riff off a moment that we're going to talk about in just a moment, which is Lady Macbeth's blood-stained hands, whether imaginary or not.
Yes.
So this is a cocktail that I've called the Out-Damned Spot, which is rye, grenadine, a little bit of lemon juice, and then a tart cranberry juice, like sugar-free if you can find it, or from concentrate and then cut it accordingly. But it won't have you imagining your hands are blood-soaked, but it will leave you having a good time.
Julia, I love this so much. It reminds me of one of my very favorite cocktails, the Blood and Sand. Maybe I just need to start drinking more cocktails with the word blood in the name.
I think that's honestly a great decision for choosing your cocktails. A great criteria for choosing your cocktails.
Yeah, like wine. I go with a cool bottle. And you know what? It's never steered me wrong.
Sometimes that's the best way to do it, man. Sometimes that's it. So we left off with Macbeth murdering the Macduff family, which is sort of the beginning of his end here, because rather than, leaving things be, he now has given Macduff motivation to get revenge against him.
Yep.
It was a bad choice. Honestly, it was a bad choice. You didn't have to kill his family. You could have just denounced him, seized his castle, stripped him of his title and his lands. That would have been fine. But no, you did a murder.
Diane knew, Julia, that would have been enough.
Yeah. So Macduff works with Prince Malcolm, who has amassed a following in England and is going to help challenge Macbeth for the throne. At this point, many of the other Scottish royalty have turned against Macbeth, who, is just being like a tyrant. He's unafraid of murdering women and children. Anyone's at risk as they piss off Macbeth.
Yeah, just to be clear, he is not at all disguising the fact that he ordered people to murder Macduff and his entire family.
Oh, no, it's real red wedding situation stuff here.
Yeah.
For sure. And at this point, while everyone is kind of turning against them, Lady Macbeth's sanity is starting to deteriorate as well. She is seen in some scenes sleepwalking, attempting to wash away imagined blood from her hands, which is a really amazing scene.
It's an incredible scene. I am sure it's a monologue that people have heard before or again seen referenced. And Julia, here I have a little game for you.
Ooh.
What I am going to do is go ahead and read off some things that people sometimes use to clean blood. And I want you to tell me if it's a good idea or not.
Uh-oh. I feel like I do know a lot of these, but let's see. I'm excited.
All right, Julia, let's begin with something people probably reach for when it comes to nasty stains.
Mm?
Bleach. Is bleach a good idea to use on blood?
I feel like bleach might not be because I think it doesn't lift the blood and it just ends up making a stain around where the blood was.
That's right. It can absolutely discolor fabric, and so it's generally not the thing you reach for first when cleaning blood. Very good, very good.
Maybe if it's like white clothing, sure, but bleach for any other color, no good, no good.
Yeah, if it's like white sheets or towels or something, you want to do that, not a huge deal, but it's very, very corrosive.
Mhm.
Okay, next, spit, Julia. Is spit a good idea to put on blood?
I don't think so, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's like alchemy where like attracts like or whatever, so bodily fluid cancels out bodily fluid.
Julia, spit is an excellent thing to use to remove blood
Whoa!
stains. In fact, whenever I shave my legs, like there's definitely blood all the time.
Mhm.
And so that is my favorite thing to use if I smear a little blood by accident on, a towel or a sheet. It really takes it off like almost immediately. I don't know. I feel a little bit like a vampire if I'm just like putting my tongue up against like a towel that I stained and then I suck at it and then the blood is away.
I was picturing the mom whose child got dirt on their face method, which is like the licking of the thumb and then rubbing it. But if you want to put your tongue directly on there, who am I to stop you?
You know, we're here in the Macbeth episode. I got to be honest with you. All right. Julia, how about OxyClean? Is OxyClean good to use on blood?
Well, if that guy from those commercials taught me anything, yes, indeed.
You're exactly right. They have powder, liquid, gel, all kinds of forms. And pre-treating the stain with OxyClean, either just like, rubbing it in there or dissolve it in a bathtub, put the thing in there.
Mhm.
Very, very helpful.
Not SponCon.
Not SponCon. No, God, I wish.
OxyClean, get at us.
All right, Julia, we got two more here. Is it a good idea at all to put meat tenderizer on a blood stain?
What kind of meat tenderizer? Like salt or honey or pineapple juice? All of which you can use to tenderize your meat, by the way.
Very true. I'm thinking about like a store-bought meat tenderizer, which is essentially like a salt-based solution.
I'm gonna say yeah, because it raises it pulls the moisture out of stuff. So maybe that pulls the blood out of things.
You're exactly right. The only note here is to be careful on fabrics like nylon or silk, which could be abraded by the salt.
The sensitive babies, of course, of course.
Exactly, exactly. The last one here, hydrogen peroxide. Is hydrogen peroxide helpful?
That seems like a bad idea. I don't think so. I think it can lift, but I think much like bleach, it is going to cause problems with the fabric.
You're exactly right. Also, unlike our childhoods, don't pour hydrogen peroxide on an open wound. That's not a good idea.
So you watch your skin sizzle.
Yeah, rarely is that helpful. Often it is harmful, and don't just pour that over open wounds or, in fact, blood stains, because it will, in fact, futz with the color dyedness of the fabric.
Yes.
Though, if it's something you don't care about, then you can soak it like you would OxyClean.
I know too much about blood stains, I'm realizing now.
Wee!
Amanda gave me big thumbs up for that, but oh no.
Yay!
Okay, so we've left here with Lady Macbeth's sanity starting to deteriorate. She's doing her out damn spot out, I say, monologue. And when Macbeth arrives to his castle to face off against Macduff and Malcolm's armies, he is informed fairly quickly after seeing her perform that monologue that she has died by suicide.
Yes.
Now, this sends Macbeth into a pretty deep despair, to be honest. It's very clear that he did, love his wife.
Yes.
And he is very much mourning her death. But nonetheless, he is getting ready to face off against these approaching armies, kind of armed with the knowledge and feeling really confident because of the witch's prophecy, which he is sure will make him invincible.
Yeah. And there was a lot of discussion earlier between Macbeth and his wife, all about her being like, no, like, we need this. I want this. Like, you've got this. Together we can do it. And so I think it's in some ways very touching, even though he's a contemptible character. I read this as him wanting to like finish the job for both of them.
It feels very like, and I know a lot of people have a lot of conflicting feelings about certain characters from Game of Thrones and certain relationships. Minus the incest, it feels very Cersei and Jaime to me.
Yeah, of like, hey, both of us have given too much, gone too far, done too much to not get this shit done.
Exactly. Yes. So Macbeth is feeling invincible, but ain't that just the way with hubris, right?
Mm-hmm.
Macbeth is informed just then that, as the prophecy said, Malcolm's army has approached Dunsinane Hill, shielded with branches cut from Burnham Wood, fulfilling the prophecy that Burnham Wood would come to Dunsinane.
Yeah, and moments before we realize this, Macbeth is saying, bring me no reports, let them fly all, like, go fuck yourself, no, I don't need you. Till Burnham Wood removed to Dunsinane, I can't taint with fear. Who's the boy Malcolm? Was he not born of woman? Like, he is so confident.
So confident, like just like a tech bro at a tech concert about to disrupt a thing that does not need disrupting.
1,000%.
So despite this meaning that he is no longer safe, Macbeth throws himself into the battle with abandon. Again, remembering, as you just pointed out, Amanda, according to the other prophecy, that no man born of woman can harm him. However, in the heat of the battle, Macduff emerges and stands before Macbeth. Like, they're very clearly like seeking each other out during this fight as well. And they fight, and Macbeth is like, again, feeling extremely confident. So he reveals this prophecy to Macduff in an effort to either like throw him off or just like, this is why I'm going to beat you kind of thing. However, Macduff at this moment tells Macbeth that he was not of woman born, but rather from his mother's womb untimely ripped.
So for anyone not following, because this is tenuous at best, he was born by early C-section and not by a vaginal birth.
And almost definitely his mother was killed during the process.
Almost
that's what
certainly
happened during that time.
Yeah, no, not easy to recover from a C-section in this day and age, and certainly not 600 years ago.
Absolutely not. So that means that according to prophecy, he can kill Macbeth.
Yep.
So Macbeth is struck with fear, but does not surrender, and they continue their fight off stage. Because no one ever dies on stage in a Shakespeare play.
Yeah, that's very true.
I mean, he's continuing the tradition of the kind of ancient Greeks and whatnot of being like, the action is going to take place off stage because we don't want to show a death on stage. That would be ridiculous.
And frankly, Julia, something I think modern television studios should think about, because we don't have to see the VFX for every single thing. Those artists should be unionized and get paid fair wages.
100%.
And you should, I think a little soupçon of VFX, a little sprinkling. I think seeing someone go off to meet their destiny and then come back and see the emotional aftermath is something that strikes me as like unique and interesting and impactful in freaking like Aeschylus plays, like ancient Greek texts now. And it's something that I think is incredible.
I agree with you, Amanda, to a certain extent, but I can also hear and see the responses from fandom being like, and then they just die off screen?
It's true. I mean, we've talked about this before, but for me, the disbelief that someone who was there isn't anymore is a very like resonant part of grief that I, don't enjoy, but I really vibe with when it is depicted. So anyway, both definitely have their merits. It is not ideal that our teenage coworkers in the drama school had just like branches from a Christmas tree in front of their faces.
Hey man, I tried my best.
You did the absolute best you could with essentially no budget. But yeah, it makes me laugh. And I've seen this done interestingly with like lighting effects and, different like, screens and like moving branch imagery. So this is a really interesting thing. And I think one of the larger scale battles that we see in Shakespeare.
Yeah. Honestly, I think like you just said, if I was going to redo it again in the modern times and whatnot, I think doing it in kind of like a screen in front and just seeing the shadows would be a really interesting way to do that. And then no one knows that they're just Christmas tree branches.
No, it's very true. We didn't have digital projectors back then, or, we had like physical cutout, like tin silhouettes to like put in front of the stage light to like make a silhouette. So lots available to us now that we did not have 20 years ago.
Yes, for sure. So let's wrap it up because in the next scene, we see that Malcolm has captured the castle and we see Macduff emerges with Macbeth's head and proclaims that Malcolm is now the King of Scotland. That's also probably my proudest prop mistress moment, which was I got to make a mold of the guy playing Macbeth's head so that we could put a head on a pike that would look like Macbeth.
Yeah, you painted it, you put hair on it, looked really good.
It looked pretty good. Honestly, I don't think I could make that again now without having to remember how to pour latex and stuff like that. But at the time, was very proud of it. 2008, I was super proud.
Hey.
So Malcolm announces that all of his thanes will be made earls because now they're going to adopt the English gentry system, which I think is so funny and something that went right over my head when we did the production. I was like, what? This is about making everyone British? What's up?
Yeah, I was thinking too, the geopolitics of the rightful Scottish heir needing to gather support in England to then overtake Scotland, and oopsie doodle, we're all earls now. Probably, I'm sure you're going to get into it, probably felt great to the English king.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that is true. And also, the fact that Donald Bing goes to Ireland and does not get support is, really kind of funny.
Incredibly funny.
We're like, all right, we get it, Shakespeare. You're a nationalist because you had to be because you got all of your money from the royalty.
Yep.
It makes sense. It's fine. Malcolm also curses Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, calling her his fiend-like queen, and then calls for all of the men there to join him to see him crowned at Scone. And then the play ends.
Yeah, we've had some really lovely final lines with The Tempest and Midsummer Night's Dream in our previous Supernatural Shakespeare series. This is perhaps the worst in all of Shakespeare. Where
it sucks. But I mean, talking about, again, the geopolitical stuff of Shakespeare time, the king probably loved that ending. He's like, yeah, we're going to see my line get crowned. These are the people that I came from. So,
yeah, but there's nothing to it. It's not elegant. It's weird. And when we did the table read for this play, the teenager playing this part, like anyone in America, reads the word scone and says scone. And he's like, wait, the last word of the play is scone? And our teacher's like, no, it's scoon, because it's supposed to rhyme with each one. Oh, boy. It's tough. It's tough.
I also want to shout out that particular dude who the first performance, in front of an audience, went to see us crowned at Scone. Scone, shit! And then blacked out.
Yep.
Oh, God, so good. So let's talk about this play, because in a lot of ways, this, without specifically pulling from mythology, is the most Greek tragedy-ish of Shakespeare's plays, in my opinion.
Which is a kind of mythology for anyone who writes drama.
Absolutely. So it feels straight out of a Greek myth with dealing with stuff like hubris and prophecy, kind of a la Oedipus, which, of course, we already did a full Oedipus episode already. So go check that out if you want to hear a little bit more about hubris and prophecy. But prophecy plays such a big role in Macbeth with the prophecy that the witches hand to him as well as Banquo. And it starts off the entire plot of the show. If this was just Macbeth coming back from that battle and then the witches don't step in and give the prophecy, nothing would happen probably.
No.
So it's interesting because it can be argued that the witches almost tempt Macbeth into fulfilling his own prophecy, sort of tempting him first with that more minor portent that he's going to be made the Thane of Cawdor. And then when that happens, it makes him more certain of their second prophecy that he will become king is more likely to happen, right? But it's also really interesting because while we see almost all of the prophecies told by the witches coming true during the play, which the only one we don't see is Banquo's line of kings, there is some question as to whether or not the prophecies were meant to be, or if Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's own thirst for power made them self-fulfilling. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Does Macbeth will himself into becoming king, or is it actually fated? Does Macbeth's confidence that he cannot be harmed put him in direct conflict with Macduff, or were they always meant to meet on the battlefield?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's really interesting. It's why adaptations of this play are still being put up hundreds of times every year all over the world. And in my opinion, it is entirely brought on themselves. Where if Macbeth and Lady Macbeth didn't have this like outside almost justification and excuse for selfish, treasonous behavior, maybe they wouldn't have done it. It to me is a really interesting case of like what would happen, that sort of adage of like what would happen if you have the confidence that you couldn't fail. And this is like, oh no, like you are clearly so like yearning for someone to say no, no, baby, like you're meant for more, that the moment somebody gives you the excuse, the cover, the guidance, you're like, okay, amazing, let's kill the king. Hell yeah, dude. Like, you're not happy with Thane. You gotta be king. Versus the lesson that I take from a lot of folklore and that we talk about in urban legends episodes all the time of like, don't tempt fate.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Be okay with what you have. And, I can unpack all these, adages in therapy, but like the basic thing being if they didn't take steps to accelerate that prophecy, to take it into their own hands, or to use it as a text they can point to and say, no, no, we deserve this. The fates said it. They'd be fine.
I think that's 100% true. And I think that, like I said, it's very Greek prophecy hubris. Like I see a lot of Oedipus in this as well, where it's like, if you had just kind of went about your life without knowing this prophecy, would all of this have happened? And the answer is no, because you take actions based on knowing that prophecy, which puts you on the course to fulfill that prophecy.
Yeah. This is a play where we get to see women have agency. One woman only, because there's only one other woman in the play, and she gets murdered and is only a mom.
Yep.
So not ideal. But Lady Macbeth is such an interesting character, and she's pretty villainous, but we love to see her say to her husband, like, no, I know better, and you have to listen to me. There are so many lines in her role that stick with me now. One of them is Macbeth is like, well, like, what if we fail? And then she goes, we fail? Screw your courage to the sticking place and we'll not fail. Like, she is kind of alternating between like encouraging and coaching him and being like, you need to do this. I can't, you must. And just in the text too, and like watching the performance, I think we're really lucky that the people who play these roles in our production were really, really good. Both have become like actual actors in adulthood, but the language overlaps a lot. And it's a really like intimate thing in Shakespeare or in any kind of structured verse where like a character, instead of having like the whole entire line, they'll have a few words and the next person picks up with the rest of those words. So if you ever see it on a page, it's like, okay, there's like the left justified first half of the line, then the second half of the line is the other person's next, and it together makes one complete iambic pentameter. But they will have sometimes like they'll switch twice in the same line where it's like one word, two words, one word, two words. And it's collaborative and it's really moving to see. And I think in a like on the page even, and I think in performance, seeing the two of them, there's just a lot there to explore. And it's not my bag. I can only read this in text and imagine it, but seeing it put out there and invoked and embodied is really fascinating because there is like contempt and awe and love and frustration and encouragement. They are using each other as a unit, but also Macbeth is clearly very moved by her death. She's clearly very moved by like the humanity of the thing that they did. And it's fascinating.
The way that you described it, I see it in my head as like choreographed sparring.
Exactly right.
The idea of like going back and forth, exchanging blows, but at the same time, it's very collaborative. That's how Lady Macbeth and Macbeth feel in my mind.
Yeah. Or again, not an art form I know a lot about, but in like ballet, when the characters, like kind of throw each other like away and then back and then away and then back. Like it's that kind of thing.
Yes. And I think that it's really interesting. We'll transition away from Macbeth and Lady Macbeth to the characters that maybe help put them on the path of prophecy. And that is the most obviously magical part of the play, which is the Weird Sisters, the three witches. Now, we're calling them weird, which is like, sure, like we can take that as kind of the literal modern usage of the word now. But the word weird actually has an etymology that derives from the Anglo-Saxon word wired, which means either fate or doom, which they
Oh,
definitely have both of those for Macbeth.
damn, I had no idea.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting too because they seem very reminiscent of like the Fates, the Moirai from Greek mythology, which we've talked about before,
Yes.
as well as a group that we haven't really talked about, which is the Norse Norns, who the Norns, as you might imagine, since we're talking in collaboration with the Fates, were in charge of shaping human destinies, and they would draw water from the well of destiny in the roots of Yggdrasil.
Incredible.
Yeah. So, besides that sort of classical mythological origins, scholars also believe that they might have been somewhat inspired by the Witch of Endor from the Bible, where like Saul consults a witch to summon the spirit of Samuel to get his advice on how to defeat the Philistines. The spirit, rather than giving him advice, gives him a prophecy of doom.
Mm.
And they also, Amanda, this is where we talk a little bit more about King James, might have had origins from the daemonology of King James, which was a book that the king wrote about the historical relationship between divination and black magic.
Damn.
So King James had a lot of opinions about witches, to the point where he also passed the anti-witchcraft laws during his reign, which prior to the writing of Macbeth actually most likely influenced Shakespeare's writing at the time. So almost as soon as they are introduced, the kind of witches here are providing sort of like a warped morality. They are at odds with the laws of the real world. And as they say in the play, fair is foul and foul is fair, which kind of embodies their whole vibe of like, we are not under your laws. We make our own laws. We are fate. We are doom. We are destiny, which I think is so fucking cool, right?
Hmm.
And speaking of language, because you spoke so beautifully about Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's language in the play, Shakespeare uses his writing and the way that they speak to set them apart from the other characters. So most of the other characters are speaking in blank verse, iambic pentameter, but Shakespeare writes the witches to speak in rhyming couplets. So like double, double, toil and trouble, fire, burning, cauldron, bubble, etc.
Hmm.
In a way, it's like almost a little disarming. Like they feel like little like fucked up nursery rhymes or
Yes, they
like
do.
little like caricatures of witches, which almost makes them seem as though they're not as dangerous as they actually are. But the interesting question that like I want to like if I was teaching this in a class or something like that is like while they're dangerous, my question is like are they truly evil? And that kind of comes back to whether or not you believe that the witches simply gave Macbeth his prophecies without any intention or if they desired to have him commit that violence that he did by giving it to him and ultimately bringing down his own downfall.
Nah, I think they are playful and find it very funny how far humans will go for minute elevations in social standing. That's my read. I think it's very fun. I think you're exactly right. They do a lot of circling, a lot of nursery rhymes, a lot of talking about animals, and they're amazing. And I think they are so funny. And this has absolutely no bearing on their lives. And they deal with matters much bigger than this. And they give someone, in my mind, they like hand him the resources he needs to fuck up his own life. And I think they find that incredibly funny.
And I love that for him. Now, before we finish this episode, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the curse of Macbeth, which like we've talked about pretty substantially in past like theater superstition episodes. But I found something new when I was researching this one. Basically, for people who aren't aware, there's a lot of superstition around saying the name Macbeth while in a theater, which is why a lot of actors and theater people will refer to it as the Scottish play. Supposedly, or at least according to the Royal Shakespeare Company on their website, the reason for the curse had to do with Shakespeare's portrayal of the witches and the way that he researched them. Apparently, Shakespeare did a lot of research on witches before writing this play. And there are claims that the spells and ingredients and incantations in the play are supposedly real, which pissed off a coven of witches who objected to Shakespeare using their real magic in the play, so cursed it.
Bless.
There's a bunch of legends around like how the actor playing Lady Macbeth suddenly passed away in like the first production, like Shakespeare's first production, and that Shakespeare himself had to fill in the part, which I think is kind of great. And then there are other stories that say like during that original run, like during Shakespeare's time, that the actor playing Duncan was accidentally killed because the stage daggers were swapped out with real daggers, which I think is probably a fake story given the fact that Duncan typically dies off stage.
But still fun.
Yes. There's the Astor Place riot, which again we talked a lot about in the
Yes, indeed.
in the theater superstitions one, but that was a bunch of people who thought one actor was better than another got into a riot, and somewhere between 22 and 31 people were killed with 120 people injured.
And that opera house is going to be a Wegmans very soon. So, life goes on.
But of course, there are ways of quote unquote breaking the curse if someone says the name. Each theater, I think, has a bit of a different one, but the most common one is exiting the theater, spinning around 3 times, spitting, cursing, and then knocking on the door to be allowed entrance back.
Which I think any witch would approve of.
I think so. 3 times is, the number of witches. It's a big magic number, and we appreciate it.
Thrice to thine, thrice to mine, thrice again to make up 9.
That's true.
You know how we do.
So both on stage and off, Macbeth has one of the darker supernatural origins and stories of Shakespeare's plays, much so compared to the lighter ones that we've touched on so far. And so maybe next time we touch on a Supernatural Shakespeare episode, maybe we'll chat about ghosts and apparitions of Hamlet.
Ooh.
Or maybe we won't. Who can say? Maybe you imagined me saying that. Oh.
That sounds amazing, Julia. I can't wait.
Well, Amanda, next time you are listening to a production of Shakespeare and you see a dagger floating before you, stay creepy.
Stay cool.